So last week on the 19th of July, we had Set the Scene 1, which was the updated environmental scan, the Mayor's Letter of Expectation, resident survey, the early LTP engagement stuff from Tess and Katie, and the schedule of briefings between now and December. This is Set the Scene 2. It will cover the financial position, our current financial position and strategy, the draft infrastructure strategy, the capital program and its current position. Now, I need to stress these are all in their raw form. You asked for a joint development process. They are all raw. They are by no means complete, polished, final. So please take that into account when you discuss them. You'll be hearing today from Russell Holden, Head of Finance, Andrew Robinson, Head of Capital PMO, and then after this final scene setter, we move to activity plans on 1st of August. That will be libraries and community housing. And then on the 8th of August by a grouping, because they relate to each other, strategic policy and resilience, strategic planning and resource consents, city growth and property on the 8th of August. And the schedule goes on from there. So unless there are any questions, we might hook straight into it. And I'll ask Russell to come up to the desk and step you through. Sorry, before we do that, just one last slide, which I should have got to. There's a bunch of noise in an LTP. You'll be hearing about what's basically every moving part in the council engine. And there's a lot of detail there. But this slide is the big picture to keep in mind at a macro level right the way through. What does our challenge look like for CapEx? What does our challenge look like for OpEx? What rates percentage will that drive? What are our financial scenarios? So if you could always attempt to anchor any conversation in what does that mean for this challenge, the debate may stay up there. And I think Dawn wants to add something to that.
Thank you, Peter. I think the other thing to remember, members, is that this is the journey that you are going on. The figures and the information you receive today are today's position as we best know it. That will absolutely evolve through the next weeks and months, all the way up to December. And although we're recording and putting this information out, it is a reinforcement of the fact that those numbers will change. And so we mustn't get into a panic mode at this stage. This is the evolution work that we're doing together. And we're giving you as many tools as we can in order to get a good debate going and to be able to see, as we move through this period, what those trade-offs and opportunities and where you wish to emphasise your investment over the coming years. So you don't have to fix it all today. Please don't think you have to know it all today, because you don't. It's about how you build your knowledge base. This is particularly relevant for our new members as well, so you don't get rabbits in the headlight feeling.
Yeah, so what we don't want is if we see something that's not very appealing to us, we don't want a knee-jerk reaction. It's a starting point to start going through how to fix that or change it or re-sculpt it, if you like. Perhaps we're making a sculpture.
There's the clay. I'm not quite sure what the shape's going to be when we get there.
Melanie. Right, carry on.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. And I just echo Dawn's comments. In fact, my third word down here was journey, so we're definitely on one. And I liken it to a hike. You know, you sort of look around in the environment and you see what's around you. You know, what things you can walk around, what things you can't, and get through. So that's sort of what we're doing now. And so we'll go through. We'll do the journey, and then we'll stop, have a bit of a pulse test, and catch our breath, and continue on. The continue on is after today. Okay, so that's the position that, from a financial perspective, that we're going to end up. And so I think we've seen this slide before. What is a financial strategy? What it isn't is providing an answer on what the result is. What it is setting the direction and the focus on the things that we look at from a financial perspective. What's prudent, what things we need to consider, and how the organisation works together. So those are the things that I guess are covered in that. We look at how we fund our services, programs and projects. We ensure that the strategic priorities are supported. Work very, very closely with the infrastructure strategies to make sure that they go hand in hand, really. They've got to be both deliverable and affordable. You know, it's not one leading the other. It's together. We balance our resilience, our financial resilience, at any rate, with the rates affordability, and that word affordability means different things to different people. So we just need to have a close look at that. We've got to ensure that there is flexibility for future ratepayers. So what that means is that we just ensure there's capacity for agility going forward, that we don't laden too much debt on future ratepayers, so that a large proportion of rates goes to repay and fund that debt. But again, these are subjective terms, so we'll be working through different scenarios as we come to that. We set what we call a debt cap, and I'll come back to that, and we set a financial benchmarks. We'll follow the covenants and ratios set out by the LGFA, but we'll look at adding to that for what was most appropriate for Christchurch City Council as well. We'll look at resilience and use of investment income. Currently, we use investment income, so that's mostly dividends and received from CCHL. We use those to offset rates. We'll consider the best use of that and look at that going forward. The strategy would also touch on the affordable waters impact. Just what that is unsure, but it'll touch on that. And also the future for local government. There's proposed new funding options coming through there, so that will be considered as part of the strategy and the wording, but there's no clarity around those things at the moment. So the objectives and intentions, it's not working? Nope. Okay. There we go. Thanks, Peter. So similar to what I've just talked about, but these are the things that we're facing as a council, facing from a financial perspective. Understand the environment that we're working with is ever-changing in the local government sector, and there's, I guess, worldwide and countrywide, there's some very significant economic challenges that we're facing. So again, we're delivering appropriate facilities.
Recording in progress.
Excellent. Fund and optimise capital renewals program. Fund appropriately to service growth. So we currently use development contributions for that. We'll look at our debt to income ratios. Like I said, we'll look at what our debt headroom is, what that is, and why we need it, and how much that should be, and maintain acceptable rates increases. Again, that's a big focus of the strategy, because most of our income comes from rates. So it's quite sensitive, and it's quite in the public eye, and it's a need for us. So what's the best way to do that? And I've covered off the flexibility for future generations. So just moving through to the next slide, please, Peter. Cool. So when we look at our funding for the current year that we're in, the wheel on the left sets out what that is, where the different funds are coming from. Rates 46%, borrowings was 24%, a couple of other big ones in there, fees and charges 12%, and Te Kaha Crown funding was 10% coming through there for capital contributions, but Te Kaha was certainly a significant part of that. And so on the right-hand side there, that's a brief summary of the rate position that we ended up at the end of June, just been, looking forward. And I'll come to the graph in a minute, but that's what it was setting out. And so this is a breakdown of what that almost 12% looked like. We've factored inflation of 4.1%, operational changes going through, just to tick over one-off revenue removal, 1.9%. So you recall that we had subventions in the current year of about $24 million. So for the next year, there's subventions of $10 million have been baked into the plan. Asset renewal funding. So that's our renewals where we're looking to increase the renewal expenditure, be funded by rates as opposed to debt. And that's another part of the strategy which we'll explore in greater depth. And then we've got 2 lines for borrowing, servicing, or sorry, 3 lines on debt really. So what the impact is for the year that we've currently in, what it is for next year, and debt repayment benefit. And then there's an element for growth, rating growth. We've got 0.9 sitting there. All that together gives us the 11.7%. So what can we do? We thought the obvious ones, reducing operational expenditure by reducing service levels, reduce capital borrowing, review the debt strategies. So that's so currently we repay debt over a 30-year term generally, and we also, like I say, we've got a strategy to move the funding of renewals to be fully rate funded by the year 2031. And recycled capital, so that's any surplus asset disposals, and perhaps any new revenue streams. Yeah, okay, things to consider. Thanks. There's an interesting metric. It shows that between the 2 years, between the current year and next year, there's going to be a significant move from funding to ratepayers. Mainly that's because of the Te Kaha funding has dried up from the Crown, has been used, and then the continuing on with the project will be picked up by borrowing, and so the repayment of that would then be moving on to rates and ratepayers. That's a big move there, but you can see that in the main it's changing, but rates is increasing, and the borrowing is increasing as well. Yeah. So what of the operational levers have we got available? Sorry for the small font. I won't go through it in detail, but we've got to the headings. Prioritise operational expenditure, prioritise the capital program. Look at, like I've already indicated, the increased rating for renewals, review that. Defer repaying 23, 24 of borrowing. So what that's talking about then is, do we lengthen the time that we repay the loans? These are just things that we're looking at. I'm not suggesting anything here is the way to go. I'm saying that all is part of the strategy, needs further consideration. Recycle capital. So like I said, we're talking about surplus land sale disposals, and at the same time and running in parallel, we've got the CCHL strategic review ongoing. The possibility of introducing new revenue streams. So in the Future for Local Government, it talked about so the options of a number of options in there for central government taking a bigger part in that. Whether that comes to fruition or not will be much later down the track, but things like having central government pay rates for the property that central government owns, the use of GST or not. Yeah. And the last item there, increased rate rise beyond normal levels. So rates are already highish, I would say. I think there's been evidence to support that. We'll do some more work around that, what that looks like, how our rates level compares to our neighbours and to similar size councils throughout New Zealand. And that's more difficult because all councils are different, and outside of Auckland, Christchurch City would be the biggest. The next would be Wellington City, would be just behind us. But we're different on the types of things that we do in the fund and how we raise our funds. Yep. Cool. Right. So what we're showing here is the complexity around the different things and the different aspects of the elements that flow into rates. And I've touched on each of these going through pretty much, talking about rating growth, dividends and subventions coming through. Talking about CapEx, so how we fund the CapEx through borrowings, through surplus disposal of assets, through capital grants coming through DCs, and how that impacts, I guess, how CapEx and OpEx, how that impacts the levels of service impacts both CapEx and OpEx. So that figures through as well. Just a point to highlight there, and that's the bottom line. I think we'd said throughout the annual plan briefings and the meetings, how you measure what does a 1% on rates look like. So we'd said it was about 6.2 million, so that's jumped up now to 6.4, and CapEx, so $95 million of CapEx is about a 1% rate increase over 2 years. That's because we split the repayment of that over 2 years, 0.3 in first year and 0.7 in the second year. Yeah. Right. As we said at the start, these are the high-level workings that is still being shaped, that mould of clay that was referred to. So the important lines to look at, they're all important. So the blue one at the bottom, that's what was factored in the 21-31 LTP. The black line, that's the final 23-24 at the end of that, what the rates were going to, if things stayed exactly the same, what would they look like at what we knew then? So you can see the rate increase, 11.7, almost 12, and then coming down. Like it's still high in year 2, that's above 10, but then coming down fairly quickly after that. So the red line, so that's what we know now, and like I said, it's very, very early on. So we've put in a small amount for the OPP. We put in an amount for that. We've extended the Eco Events Grant going forward. And the CapEx, we've put an amount in that will come to that, highly indicative of what that might look like. So that's what we're looking at today. That'll change tomorrow and will continue to change as we go through and make adjustments. But that just shows the shape of the picture. Yeah, thanks, Peter. Pretty much I've covered that in that earlier slide. Basically, the split of the 11.7, which where we're sitting, and really in summary, what is that saying? It's saying that there is not a lot of scope for movement without something significant happening. There's no silver bullet in this to be able to reduce that. There's a number of smaller things that we can look at, and together we can look at what that'll come to. But that's how we're looking. Yeah, thank you, Peter. So this is a position that council's been through before, not me, and not for some people around the table and some folk behind me, but some very experienced people and some, most people through council have been through this before. So what have we learnt? We've learnt that there's a number of things that we've gone through and done. So we've critically analysed and reshaped the capital program before. So we'll be doing that again. Significant decreases applied to OPEX. There was significant work around COVID and at the start of the last long-term plan. So that's been undertaken. I'm not saying it won't be undertaken again, but we've already made significant, headway into that, but that will certainly be looked at. We've considered levels of service reductions, what that might look like and what the appetite is both for elected members and for the public. And we've reviewed staffing proposals and vacancy levels and what that entire mix looks like. We've done that. We'll continue to do that. So in building the numbers that we've got today, we've just taken the existing plan that we had, extended it out for, it was to 31, put in the inflation, updated that. We've looked at Burrell for the inflation, applied that. The good news is in that space is, so I should just step back a bit. Burrell provides inflation adjusters for a number of categories of local government expenditure for the local government. And as part of the LTP, they'll be doing that twice. We're going to be sending it through, doing it in October. but now they've brought that forward, and late August we're expecting that to be coming through. So we'll be able to update the inflation adjusters on that. Currently for the year ended June, we've got carry forwards of about $33 million in capital in there. That hasn't been taken into account yet. We've just got to see where they will fit in, because the assumption being used was that they wouldn't be added, carry forwards wouldn't be added on, they would be substituted for other things. So the capital, it'll be part of the reshaping or the reviewing of the capital program, and that'll be covered later. Sure. So this is what we're currently looking at. Like I've said, it's the draft workings of where we are. There's much more still to come in that space. So we can see the core program, that's the goldy bit. We can see the pink bit on the top. So that's the, I guess, the projected, or no, not projected, that's not right. Just the rough workings of where we are now before the reshaping takes place. Yeah. And Te Kaha is that light green bit. You can sort of see that the magnitude of that is happening on us. Yeah. Thanks, Peter. And so, like, inflation is a big part of the assumptions that we apply. Like I said, we use Burrell, and that's what we're currently using. You can see it's where it's the information we've currently got, and it is coming down. But we'll just see what that looks like. It's difficult. We'll take the best information that we've got at the time, but in saying that, no one could perceive, the OCR jumping 7 times in such a short time frame. So this is the best that we'll have at the time, and be able to put that in place. Just understanding that there will be the possibility of other things disrupting that. I guess, sorry, go back to that one, Peter. So the wee note that I've made for myself is this is the level, inflation is the level of increase. And when we see it going down, it doesn't mean prices are going down. It just means the level of increase is not as much as it was. It's still going up, just not as fast. I think sometimes when you look at those graphs, you think, oh, it's coming down. Well, it's a good thing the price isn't going so fast, but it is still going up. Yeah. Thought it'd be interesting just to look at the Te Kaha impact on both debt servicing, and so this is interest and principal, and the rates increases. And so currently debt funding for of rates is about 21, just almost 22%, and expected to peak currently at about almost a quarter, so almost 25% by FY28, so financial year 28. So it's a significant amount. And then on the other side, you see the rates increases there. So where we were, so see other increases driving the gold line, and the blue bit is Te Kaha. Over the time, Te Kaha has a rates impact of almost 5%, 4.7, so a significant impact. And so for debt, what are we looking at? So this has been just pulled together. It's the rate funded borrowing, and what that looks like going forward. So the blue is the actual, the black is what we've already had in the plan, and the pink, if you like, is the workings that we're currently going through and the impact that is having. Yeah. So like a lot more will come back on that. Thanks, Peter. I spoke about headroom, debt headroom. So what is that? So should a significant event occur, the strategy is to maintain borrowing capacity to a level. And currently that level is $400 million. So that's taken into account the level of insurance that recoveries we would get, the level of government grants or assistance that we would get, and how much would council then need to fund. So there's been some analysis done as part of the last LTP, and that's about $400 million. And so you can see that, so the graph on the left, that's the red line if I'm talking about, and that's significantly higher than our current projected debt and debt. On the right side, that's showing how much is available, debt room's available. That's what our current thinking. It's not a target that we want to get to, but it's saying how much capacity have we got. And at the moment, it's okay, but you just need to maintain that. So we'll be having a close look on that. So next one, please, Peter. We're having a close look on that. So that was, like I say, based in 2021. Our assets have increased significantly, 32%. In early thinkings is we'll probably may need to increase that debt headroom, but again, that'll be a discussion with our insurance, and we'll do some more modelling on what that will look like, but it'll be coming back. So that's one of the considerations that we need to look at. Oh, yes, sorry. Thought this was a very interesting metric, just for consideration and for understanding. So the solid black line, that's the overall rates increases from 2021 through to 23, 24. The two dotted lines in the middle, low government cost adjusters, so that's the Burrell inflation factors that I talked about, and CPI sitting in there as well as the greeny blue. Yeah. The bit at the top, that's the capital goods price index. So a lot of things that council buy, particularly in the capital space, is impacted by that level of inflation. The CPI is a basket of goods that the average householder would use. Council doesn't buy a lot of carrots or televisions. Most of our expenditure is in that top line. So that's the challenges that we have when I say we, it's all of us, isn't it? So what is the gap? So I had a good discussion with Dawn earlier in the week, last week, and she pulled out like this tool, and so we've adjusted it. And what it's saying is, okay, if we're currently looking at say 13.5 or a 12% as we factored, what will it take to what level of cuts or other revenue, what is the gap between what we currently got and getting rates down? So you see there from the 13.5 to get down to 12, we're currently looking at OPEX savings of about $4 million and a capital reduction of about $300 million. So still keeping that in there. We've got the $300 million coming through. To get that down to 10 is an $18 million reduction. To get it down to 8 is a $31 million reduction. And this is just the impact for 24, 25.
To put my mic on this we used in 2021, and we used it rigorously and regularly all the way through our discussions to help you understand, depending on which lever you pull, it has a consequence. And so we will continue to do that as we work through the weeks and months as we shrink down into where we think you're likely to end up.
Yes, that's very correct. Thank you, Dawn. Yeah, and I guess I should have mentioned it earlier, but so the top right-hand column, 13.5%, we have incorporated a number of things that we know or anticipate will be coming through the activity management plans. We haven't got everything in yet. The budgeting hasn't been done in that space yet. We've looked hard at the capital, or the organisations looked hard at capital, but like I say, there's still a significant work in progress. So far as OPEX go, there's still significant work to take place. So that, I'm not saying that's the highest. That is, what I'm probably saying is that's not the highest. We expect that to be initially going up and then having a closer look. So this tool that we've got, I think has a lot of value as well, and so we'll be updating that and continually bring that as information is more readily available. So some of these challenges that I've already covered, the reforms and just the uncertainty around that, the impact of the affordable waters, just what the timing is around that. So the numbers I've talked about at the moment, there's no assumption of 3 waters coming out. This is before we'll do that. That'll be a separate exercise we'll do. We'll do the long-term plan, and we'll look at taking the 3 waters impacts out, what that'll look like. We've got ongoing inflation and labour market constraints. I think the North Island rebuild has been signalled. We acknowledge that projected rates are too high, and so we need to do some work in there. And the early look at the capital program, like I say, is a work in progress. And just a final warning, something to be aware of, that the dividend streams initially up, but they'll be flat to declining going forward. So we can't place too much resilience or expectation on those. So I'm happy to take any questions on any of that. Excellent.
Tyler had your hand up first, and then we've got Sam, Yanni. Far away.
Kia ora. I've got some questions on Te Kaha.
Yep.
And you may not be able to answer these at the moment. But are we expecting a return from Te Kaha after it's built in 2026, going into 2034? And if so, what's the forecasted return?
You're right. I can't answer that at the moment. I wouldn't expect it to be you're thinking like a financial return coming back?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if we're investing $680 million in something, I'd expect something back, but I'm not sure how it's structured, which is going to lead me into my next question.
Okay.
But
yeah. I guess my first week here was the council meeting adopting the extra VAT going through Te Kaha. Look, but we'll have to come back to you on that, councillor, just what that looks like. But you build facilities for a host of reasons, and part of that is the promotion of the city, getting more people in, the vibrancy and the economic upturn of people coming in. Yeah.
Okay.
Not necessarily a financial return coming back. I don't think there's a return from Forsyth Bar going back to the Otago Regional Council.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah.
Which sort of leads me into my next question: is what umbrella does Te Kaha live under? Say, for example, there's all of these different infrastructure requirements, and Te Kaha has always sat outside of any financial projections. I'm wondering what does that look like, and is there going to be any financial return, if any? Even if we were to add a levy, would that go into a rates reduction or other things? I'm sort of just trying to get a perspective on it.
Okay. Te Kaha Delivery is delivering the project, and Venues Otautahi will be the operator of the asset. Where the actual asset itself actually sits, that hasn't quite been decided yet, so we'll come to that. The return, but a lot. So there's an operational budget in regards to for 26 onwards, I think, is actually in the current LTP in regards to helping with the funding of that.
Yes.
One of the things that we are working through at the moment is we're still having conversations with the other councils in regards to support for operational funding, but as in regards to return, essentially at the moment that will sit as part of the operational case with Venues Otautahi, right, to reduce the operational costs of it. Unfortunately, stadiums don't tend to have a great return, a bit like libraries.
A little bit like swimming pools.
Oh, swimming pools.
I've heard.
Yeah, I was trying to be polite.
It brings money into the community. So,
Correct.
for instance, you pay out so much for, say, Phil Collins, but the estimate that CNZ made for Phil Collins was around $6 million into the community, and that could be a petrol station, a restaurant, a force.
So it's great for economic development, not necessarily for the ratepayer
Council,
themselves.
no.
Yep.
Well, the
It will-
ratepayer,
it
yes,
is.
but not necessarily for the council's financials.
Okay. Indirectly benefiting the ratepayer.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, my mind's sort of blown on that. I was really surprised at that.
We will give you a copy of the original
Thanks.
business
Hang on,
case.
hang on.
Appreciate that.
Hang on.
Thanks for answering that, Russell, Leah, Peter. I appreciate it. Tough questions,
Yeah,
and
no.
I'm looking forward to seeing the slides. Thanks.
I'm glad she came back from holiday, Tyler. Yeah, it's-
Yes. Well done, Leah.
At least somebody is.
Okay, Sam?
Hey, thank you for that. It's good to kind of get a bit of a snapshot of where things are at to start with. I'm probably, over the next while, bite it off in small chunks as opposed to trying to solve everything now. So I'm probably keen to tease out the capital program a bit more. So can you just so I'm clear in my mind at the moment, the rate projections you've got baked in, the 12, 13, 14%, does that include, does that model the capital requests that people have made as well? Or is that based on a sort of $400 million limit?
No, it's higher than the 400. Sorry, through you. Higher than the $400 limit. It's baked on some of those things going through now. So yeah, we'll need to CapEx doesn't have a huge increase initially. A huge increase on the rates. It's like I said, 0.3 in year one and 0.7 in year two. So we're only currently looking at that, like I say, the first 2 years. But yeah, that significance is about 800 million. Program is driving that.
I guess that's what I'm trying to understand is so the rate. I get that it doesn't have an immediate impact, but probably longer term,
Yes.
it has something that has a real benefit for us. So, just so I'm clear in my mind, at the moment, the rating projections you've put in, what is the capital number that they are modelled off?
It's about 800 million.
Right. So we're at 800 for say next 24, 25.
Yes.
25, 26, 24, 25.
Yeah.
600.
But in terms of the actual deliverability, we know firsthand that actually that's only, we can hit 400 if we're lucky, plus some of that external stuff. So I guess I'm just trying to understand from an organisational point of view what you're doing before it comes to us, because I don't have that argument here. I'd much rather have considered expert advice from the organisation around what that looks like.
So you are getting today the unconstrained position that's come out in terms of the AMPs and the activity plans.
Yep.
As we work through those with staff, we will see that coming down and we will be giving you a set of recommendations. But today's position, obviously because the activity plans and AMPs are literally just being finished hot off the press, that's what we're going to, and you'll see that in the lava diagram, Sam, as we go through today's presentation. But to know that we absolutely will be working through the prioritisation as part of the infrastructure strategy.
Yeah, so that's really good to hear. I guess from and I don't know how other people feel, but from a governance point of view, what I'd be really keen to see is the organisation do the work on that cap. I know it's joint development, but we were very clear in our letter of expectation around the need for it to be deliverable. So I guess what I'm saying is there's no point having an argument over something that isn't deliverable when in-house we've got a heap of people that know how this stuff should be managed. So probably before we, and I know you're nodding because you agree with me, but before we get the next discussion on capital, I guess what I'm saying is I probably don't want to see that until that work's been done. So is that fair to leave with you to?
If you can leave it with us, we will take you on the journey. You are fortunate in that you were part of the process in 2021. Some of our members were not.
Yeah.
But clearly we need to put forward a set of recommendations to councillors in terms of what's the right level of capital programme, what do we believe sits below the line, what do we believe sits above the line.
I guess what I'm saying is we've already made it clear as a council what that right level of capital is.
Yes, but I'm sure that members will also be debating that at some point through this
But
period
I think
as well.
you can have that discussion around the margins, but there would be no point us writing a letter of expectation that we unanimously agreed on if that wasn't the case. So it's more feedback to take away. I'd like to see more done on that so that we can actually have a meaningful discussion around the margins on stuff.
As long as it considers the long term, I would hate to live in a world where we just said, here's what we can do this year, and we never plan to have any ambition to scale up if we needed to.
And that's not what the letter said. The letter said it needs to be deliverable. So I'd kind of expect that there's a deliverability for next year, but if there are improvements, that's when we have a discussion as a council over that limit, provided the organisation can gear up to do it. So I think we're sort of on the same
providing it's
page.
totally transparent and we see what's been altered and what
Which it will
hasn't,
be.
you know.
Yeah.
And
I'm
I
just
think-
saying it's not a help. 800 is not a helpful discussion because we know we can't do it.
Yeah.
So we're going to have an argument over something when we should focus our resource and focus as a council on something else. Yeah.
Yeah. And Lynn, did you have anything to add? Or?
No, I just wanted to say that as the part of the activity plan and asset management plan presentations, there will be a level of oversight by service unit as to what the key asset and CapEx projects will be. But certainly work is already underway to reduce the program to deliverability, In many cases, that will be a matter of timing. So there will be shifts in timing to flatten the deliverability curve. Andrew will be able to deal with this further as part of the CapEx presentation later today.
Great, thank you. Is that it? Yanni?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I was interested in the introduce new revenue streams. I've put forward a number of suggestions around Te Kaha, for example. I guess to say that unlikely to be soon enough, but like we've known about Te Kaha for, a decade. Is there anything that I'm just trying to understand, like what we could do short term and who's actually driving that? Because I'm just increasingly concerned, like we're going to finalise the design. There's no additional revenue coming in from the design. And we're going to have huge operating costs. We still haven't sorted out with our neighbouring councils around contributions. Things like a levy, which I've raised as part of the annual plan, gets ruled out of order. But I guess I'm just wondering, like, is there, like, what's the kind of external revenue strategy that we've got as an organisation around things like who benefits and who pays? Like, is there a piece of work that's happening around that so that it doesn't all just fall back on the
Okay, so who's going to answer that question?
The conversations with the other local areas was as part of the LTP, because like us, they have to consult. So we are starting those conversations now.
And that's for OPEX.
For OPEX, yeah.
Your operator is working through all of the commercial side of it in regards to rights and stuff. So that is part of that, so we can get some more update from that. But Yanni, just to reassure you, the work is happening, and it is happening now, because we are now focused on the LTP.
So approaching like Rata Foundation seems an obvious one to go to, and do some sort of partnership agreement around funding.
Yeah, look, Yanni, you're getting into the weeds, and I think you're raising a good point. We can pick it up, and I think we will pick that up, but probably not today.
But this is what I hear every 3 years, and every year I hear it's not for today, it's not for today. Now we've got a slide in front of us that says unlikely to be soon enough. So I hope you can understand my frustration, right? We've known about this for a long time. We've got levers that we can actually look at doing, but we need to start getting some tangible progress on it. What I'm concerned is that we're leaving it way too late in the piece to get any meaningful contribution. I guess the other thing
we're
is
just starting the LTP, and this is where the work sits. So, Leah, can you give us some assurance that this is going to be Yanni's concerns or his ideas are going to be picked up and as part of the LTP?
Yep.
Could we get an update?
Absolutely.
Perhaps that's the best.
So like with venues Asutahi, like just I guess a little bit concerned if we could get some really have it separated. So when venues Asutahi have come to the council with their annual reporting or the regular quarterly reporting, I've asked if we can get an understanding of what's happening at each venue, but I'm told that that's not available. So in terms of the Te Kaha, if that just gets washed into venues Asutahi, I guess I'm concerned we don't get transparency around the ongoing costs of it. So is it possible too that within each of those venues we can get a sense of what the cost is and what the revenue opportunities are?
So I think you've had that answer from Venues of Tatahi already, Councillor, in terms of that's not possible. And the Leah has heard exactly what you've described, and she's given her response, which is fundamentally tied to the LTP. What I will stress, though, to every single elected member today is jumping on one lever, and absolutely right that you think about Te Kaha, and we all collectively think about how do we maximise that asset to give us whatever we can get out of the system. That is not going to fix the problem of that one item. You're going to have to pull so many levers across the board to get to a position whereby you've got a budget that you can all comfortably live with, and our public and our businesses can live with. So it's important that you think about all of those things and not just the particularly obvious matters that fundamentally in capital terms are going to give you a little benefit to the rates number. And we do have to think about our OPEX.
But it is one of the major costs that
Could I just?
It is,
I'll
but it's
bring that
already
up with
baked
the
in,
VO.
Yanni.
I'll bring that up with the VO board on Friday. We were having a board
can I just say,
could just to remind people, because some of you may not know, and some of you would have forgotten, but V-Base, which was VO prior to the earthquake, was the only venues company breaking even in this country. So that is where VO is targeted, not making a profit, but just becoming even at some time in the future. But it is a journey, and it's not going to happen tomorrow. But it was the number one company running venues in this country.
And when staff did when we got really good review into VBase, we got very good details around what was happening at each of the facilities independently and which ones were costing and which ones were breaking.
And I will bring that up at the board meeting on Friday.
Thanks, Yanni. Now we'll come to Tyrone, but just how are we going for time?
We're okay.
We're okay. Tyrone.
Kia ora. So this kind of touches on some previous questions, I guess, but can we go to slide 17, the lava chart? The old lava chart. Right. So just on the pink bit. So what sort of projects are like big chunky ones in there? What sort of things are we looking at?
Probably that discussion, if I could just wait till the capital guys follow me,
No
and you'll be
worries.
able to see through each of the activities and what's in there, will probably be best answer that.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. And just into, like, I know that we can't change the past, but just into on the green stream, if you like.
Takaha.
Yeah, the Takaha piece. Like, how different would that look if you took 150 million out of it, just out of interest? Like, because that's a conversation for the
Recording
public, right?
stopped.
Like, I mean, I don't think it would drastically, like, the increase in cost that was voted on a couple of years ago wouldn't drastic. I know it's too late, but I wasn't there. Wouldn't drastically change that green chunk, would it?
Recording in progress.
So, yes, the suggestion is that we take or we reduce the spending on Takaha by 150 million.
No.
No, I'm just saying, but when we increase the
Adam,
cost
put the
on it
budget
to add an extra 5,000 empty seats,
Oh, yes.
how different would that have made that? How much lower would the lava fills onto it? Yeah.
Yeah.
But that depends on the figure, because that's not 150 million.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, how different would it look? Like, would it look different at all, or would it?
Oh, it would definitely look different, and the ongoing operational costs would look different as well. But I'll need to do that. But
I'm not sure what value that would
Yeah.
necessarily give you.
Well, I
The
think
fact that
it's a. I mean, because often the criticism is you spent money on the stadium and that's what's costing so much money. But it was actually only like we were building the stadium anyway. So it's just about having it's that communication piece.
So do you want that information to come back to you via a memo or something, or you're just making a point?
I don't need it to be massive. It would just be helpful at some point if I could understand it.
margins, yeah.
Okay, can you do that, Russell? Is that...
so what we'll do is, Madam Deputy Chair, is we'll go through and just work out the cost implications of 150 million.
Russell, I don't want to make you do a whole bunch of work. Like,
No.
it's just so that I can get it.
We'll do
clear
it.
in my head.
We'll do it high level.
Thank you. Mel?
With the pink bit Tyrone was talking about, I just wanted to make sure we were able to see what those CapEx requests were, because I presume if units are putting those forward as items I'd like to be looked at, they see them as important and maybe even more important than what's in the current program. So that's true. Isn't it?
So just to help Russell, you absolutely will over time see that, because if you recall, we gave you the whole of the capital programme in 2021 and we said this is where the line is. And members actually move things from...
That's right, but these are requests as opposed to what's already there. So
no, but it
that's
would
all.
be the request listed with a lot.
And then the other question was just about the carry forwards, because in my mind it would make perfect sense that carry forwards are carried forward into the next following year and then other stuff shifted accordingly, and the question being what gets shifted in this process. So why is it that it's sort of a standard view that carry forwards are kind of disappear?
Through you, Deputy Mayor. They don't necessarily disappear.
Right.
So I guess there's a reason why it's a carry forward. So the reason why wasn't it done? Did we run out of time? What was it?
Yeah.
Or did something change, And so then that would be looked at in relevance, just as you said about that pink bit. How does the bit that hasn't been done, how does that line up with those other things that we want to do? And where in the priorities does that now sit? So you would normally think, okay, we'll just add it on top. But the projection or the thrust through the annual plan was that wouldn't happen. That if we wanted to put more into the capital program to make it deliverable, that would be by substitution. So that was the undertaking taken. So
So you're basically saying you want to do a deep dive into the carry forwards to see which ones are still valid.
well, yeah, the capital boy folks will be doing that. So that'll come back, and like council approves the carry forwards, so there'll be a level of discussion around
Yep.
that when that time comes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay,
Good question.
the mayor.
Laha.
Ulla.
Welcome back. It was very hard getting off the plane today. Just a question, CCHL dividend, have you factored any of that in? Because I believe we shouldn't, after what we've heard from Abby and Paul, that if we do get anything from them, we should just throw it against debt repayment. Have we factored in them giving us X number of millions and that's part of our income?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, to Mr. Mayor. Yes, we have. We've got information from CCHL what the projected dividends are going to be. That's still to be ratified in some instances, but for initially going out, that has been put in. But we acknowledge fully that at the outset of this, that is flat to declining, the level of investment coming through, and also flagged just prior to you coming through, what's the best use of those dividends? Is it to use it solely for offsetting rates? What should we do? Certainly it would reduce the risk of fluctuations if it was applied to debt, but that's a big move to do that. Like, that's not something that can happen overnight. So if you're talking, $55 million of dividends, what's that? That's almost 7%. That's 7% rates, isn't it? But over 7.5% rates. So that's not an instantaneous move. That's a transition to do that if that was going to be the way to go. So that is part of what the strategy would look at, and would be coming back seeking direction on what that would look like.
I just don't want us to, in the past we've had to, and it's the reason why we've depended on it, but we've got to try and start weaning ourselves off that if we can. And the other one, that Transwaste dividend was quite high this year, but I know and you know why it was, because they had those imputation credits they had to get rid of. So going forward, it's not going to be as high as it was.
So we've used the imputation credits. We've used $24 million of credits in the current year that we're in, and we've got $10 million for next year.
Okay.
And then it's falling right back.
Thank you.
So can I just clarify, when you talk about using dividends to pay down debt, potentially, is that debt at CCHL or debt at council?
Can I just cover that? Sorry, I just want to, so just to clarify just some of your comments, Mayor, in regards to CCHL dividends, it is a return that we're getting on our assets of a huge, and we should be using some of that to offset rates. What that amount is quite different whether we use it for debt, because if you don't reduce it, because it is an income for us. The problem is, as you said, is we have currently forecast to have about 50 million a year, which is, as what Russell said, that's a 7. If you take that out, you're talking about a 7 or 8% rates increase that you have to recover every year. So, but the point, and I know what you're saying, but the point is, we still also need to recognise the fact that you've got a lot of investment in those assets, and they need to be income generating, and it shouldn't be just repaying debt.
But I'm just saying, because we were a few years ago, before either Tyrone or I was here, the council asked CCHL for a super dividend, which has not helped their cause. So they're in the gun as well as far as paying.
But they currently, part of their dividend payout ratio that they have been paying over the last number of years has been reduced to actually reduce some of that debt. See, pre the capital release, which is what you were talking about, the 350 million that went onto CCHL's balance sheet, pre that, they used to pay 95% of their profit every year in dividends, cash dividends that come in as income. When we took on that debt, we had a plan with council, aligned with council, of reducing that payout ratio so that they could start repaying that debt over time. The big discussion is about over what time they pay that back. No different to what we do in council on how we pay it back over the time. That's the balancing conversation, and in addition to that, it's the conversation about what return we want on our investment.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get us away from gimme, sort of.
We need to actually make sure that we're getting an appropriate return on our investment.
Okay, so really it comes down to two things that we can do. We sell something or do less. that if we're not getting the money.
And
from-
again, that's why we set up CCHL to reduce our rates.
Oh, they're good. Don't get me wrong, but they've gone through some extremely hard
conversation.
times with COVID and interest rates and stuff, just like we have. They're just a business, and they're copping the same problems that we've
But that's a conversation I think that we need to have. Yep. Okay, so that's all the questions on that one, so we'll move on. Thank you.
Thanks, Russell. All right, we move on to the draft infrastructure strategy and the capital program current position. To Sam, your question about proposed. The purpose of today was to set the scene and, if you like, illustrate the current challenge rather than solve it today. But there's a dedicated section on the 6th of September to come back to you with capital that will be in a different shape to what you see now. So this was really to set the scene. Thanks, Sarah. I'll get out of your way.
Thank you. Right, let me figure out if I can use this.
Just the arrows.
Easy stuff. Right, so this is kind of taking the conversation back up a level. I know you've just had a lot of information there, so I will try and keep it brief. And then we can potentially have a wee discussion at the end as to how this actually kind of relates to the conversation you're having, but also the conversation you will have next capital program as well. So just to recap, the infrastructure strategy is a direction setting document that guides infrastructure priorities and investment for the LTP and over 30 years. So we really need to kind of consider that as well. It's a sustained period of either, decision making and changes or decisions that will relate to 30 years worth of infrastructure investment, not just this current LTP. So keeping that in mind, it makes sense that actually the infrastructure strategy, every 3 years when we do review it, it does take quite an enduring approach. You're not likely to see substantial changes, but you are going to see how this will reflect the current environment and essentially reflect the conversations that we're having around the table. So according to legislation, we need to do 3 things in particular, which is identify the significant issues, the challenges that we face with our infrastructure, consider the principal options to address them, and then a most likely scenario for investment, which is what we're kind of calling our strategic approach, and then set out the approach to how we'll manage those assets. So we last had this discussion late March, I think 21st of March, and we discussed with you the challenges that infrastructure kind of investment planning was facing. We've talked to asset managers across the organisation, talked to ELT, had quite an ongoing conversation around this just to make sure that we really did identify those core high level challenges. So not getting too much into the weeds, just recognising it as a strategy. So the significant issues actually that we identified form the basis of the draft that you received on Thursday afternoon, I think. Acknowledging that it is quite a substantial document and it is a first draft, there are 3 probably main parts that you could look at, and happy to go through these in more detail with anyone as well. So we have the summary, the explanation, and then we've actually got a little bit of a timeline then as well. So pages 20 to 27 of the draft that you received on Thursday are probably the most relevant parts to pick out. Obviously, I'd love if you read the whole thing, but it's a lot of information. So if we go here, so we identified 4 overarching issues that are facing our infrastructure. So the first one was we need to look after what we've got and we need to deliver what we say. This is really about that deliverability, affordability piece, that prioritisation. So the conversation essentially that we've just been having, that's really that one there. We've got a lot of constraints, we've got a lot of unprecedented times essentially, and we need to figure out how we're going to reflect all of that in our decision-making processes. Obviously a very key one here, we need to ensure our infrastructure is resilient to the impacts of climate change and natural hazards. Obviously not a surprise to anyone. It's really about anticipating, planning and preparing. It's about making some more strategic decisions about what we're doing with assets, where we're placing our assets, how we're building our assets, just to incorporate the fact that things are changing. So we can't just consider status quo acceptable anymore. We need to plan and invest for growing and changing demand. This is obviously a conversation that's come up quite a lot with the Resource Management Acts, with PC 14, and what do we need to do either differently, what do we need to consider differently. You've heard a lot from the research and monitoring team here about how things are changing, and we need to include all of that into our decision making as well. And then the last one, a bit of an overarching one, We need to continue to improve our understanding of our infrastructure so we can make the best decisions for our community. So it's really about having the most up-to-date information. That's about having consistent information across all of our assets. And that's about also, from our perspective, I guess, how we give you that information to assist with your decision-making processes and really come out with what is ultimately the best situation in what we can see as a very constrained environment. So the next part is how can these inform our long-term planning? So we just have some questions there. They're a bit more of a thought-provoking thing than anything that's an actual answer, but it's essentially we have a lot that we need to address. We have a lot that we need to look after in terms of assets, and responding to these issues can be contradictory in nature, and it just is about looking at the competing priorities and defining within that, I guess, what the top priorities are. So it's not easy, and that's why this is essentially a decision-making tool to try and help you with these conversations as you go through the joint development process. Keeping in mind that while the strategy covers 30 years, we do need to start thinking about this now. We can't just keep, pushing the can down the road. There is a lot that we need to have decisions on now, which will go out for 30 years. So as part of that legislative requirement, the draft infrastructure strategy identifies actions that could be taken to respond to the significant issues, also in your document. So I won't read out all of them, but essentially there's quite a few here. We have come up with some proposed actions, noting again, first draft, that we think will help to address these significant issues. So very happy to take feedback after this or offline as well, but I will point out just a couple of them. So the first one came up in conversation earlier, scale the size of our capital program. Now, the wording in this reflects that it could change, the response for this could change throughout the 30 years. So for example, earlier we were saying, well, actually it's about making that deliverable, and so that's potentially reducing the capital program. That's not to say that in 10 years time we would still need to reduce that. So it would be about scaling it to the environment and to what we think is actually achievable and affordable. Prioritise funding to renewals and maintenance programs. You heard a little bit about the finances around that as well. And that's also about making systemic process changes to the planning and delivery of capital projects. And that's really about how we kind of holistically consider capital projects and the funding associated with those as well. So again, very happy to take any questions about those at the end, but there's quite a lot of detail in there. So very happy also for you to go away and kind of have a bit more of a consideration of that as well. And then lastly here, we have some considerations that you need to think about when you're looking at this document, but also going through the joint development program. So this is still a first draft. What we really want to do with these actions is we want you to use them to help inform your thinking and to guide the investment decisions as you go through the activity plan. So as Peter mentioned, on the 2nd of August, I think it is, you'll start considering the activity plans. And when you're looking at those decisions that you need to make within those, or the priorities when you're looking at that capital program, having a look at these actions and then looking at how you can apply them throughout the individual activity plans, so that essentially what we can see is where the infrastructure strategy has been reflected in each of these activity plans and then as a whole throughout the long-term plan. We're going to have to ask ourselves some pretty difficult questions. Again, that's come up quite a few times already, and it will continue to come up. We've got limited resources and limited funding. We can't actually do everything. Everything that we make a decision on has a trade-off. We have immediate and future needs, so it's not just about the next 3 years, but it is about the 30 years and actually even beyond that as well. We've got risks, and we need to weigh those up when we're making those decisions while we're balancing the competing priorities. And there's just a couple of questions there as well to ask yourself. So essentially, it's the same that you've been hearing. We're not alone with these issues that we're dealing with. The National Infrastructure Strategy actually says some very similar things. You've got a lot of stuff coming out of central government at the moment as well that really raises these questions. It doesn't necessarily provide answers, which does show that this is complex in nature. It is going to take a sustained approach to actually deal with these issues, but the first step is identifying them, and then the second step is actually really being cognizant of them as we start going into this joint development process. So if anyone's got any questions, considerations?
Do you want to pause for questions now? So Tyler, then Yanni.
Kia ora. Just have a question in one of the slides actually. It was that big list of priorities, I believe. And there were two priorities that I wanted to talk on or ask questions on. One of them was prioritise integrated infrastructure planning, and two was making systemic process changes to the planning and delivery of capital projects. One of the things of public interest was the perception that we would build something on, would renew a road, for example. Then we would do Three Waters infrastructure changes, dig a hole in that road, and then rebuild that road again. What changes are happening internally to mitigate that at this point? I know that it started when I first got elected. How are we tracking along with that?
In terms of the specifics of that, I won't pretend that I can answer that question, and so we can always get more information for you.
Okay.
But what that is really about is actually making sure that not only do we progress those changes, but we continue to enhance that and make sure that we are consistently bettering ourselves, so to speak. So at a very high level, this is probably not the place to answer that one, and I can definitely try and get you that information.
I'm thinking of it from
more
more of a
just
high
for
level.
clarification, we started that a long,
Years
long time
ago.
ago, and it's about the right hand knowing what the left hand's doing, and de-siloing and everyone working together. And I think Lynette can be quite confident in telling us that is happening, the coordination of the work programs.
Because there could
Dawn, did
be
you want to add something
projected
to that?
financial savings already, because they could be on the work plan for, say, into 24 and change.
So one of those factors is how do we think about impact of different parts of our capital programme in different parts of our business?
Gotcha.
And it's one of the questions I have asked my staff since arriving here, and I know that actually happened before I did, but it's become more and more at the front of our brains. There will be times where we won't get it completely right, but I would argue very strongly that primarily most of the time we actually do these days. And as we move through the nature of deciding on the capital programme through your work, actually those will be one of the factors we will be actually holding up and saying, well, if you wanted to move that one, that has implications for this one, this one and this one.
Which is what I was leading to, yeah. I was wanting to lead into a positive angle and look at that restructuring and also capitalise on the potential financial savings, cost savings that we're going to have by restructuring those work plans for the future. So, no, thank you so much. Thanks.
Thanks, Tyler. Good question. Yanni.
Thank you. I think it's quite hard for people in the community to visualise the infrastructure strategy, and it's such a fundamental document. I was wondering if we're doing any work to build a digital twin so that we can kind of show people what the different scenarios are around time and infrastructure improvement. I guess specifically for me, what I'm interested in, which I don't see in here, is what is the time frame and cost of returning to the pre-earthquake state of our infrastructure? Like, it used to be 30 years, but I suspect it's probably pushed out to 40 or 50 years now. But for the people in my community, the thing that they struggle with is, when is the earthquake damage actually going to be fixed? And maybe it's never. Maybe we just need to say to them, sorry, it won't be fixed in your lifetime. Give up on that concept. But people kind of thought after the earthquake, when we deferred our renewals, that the repairs would give stronger infrastructure, right?
Yeah.
That's obviously not happening. And we're getting now infrastructure failing that was part of the skirt patch repairs. So I'm just wondering how the infrastructure strategy...
Yanni, you're talking about horizontal infrastructure.
Yeah, so I'm kind of wondering how the infrastructure strategy is kind of presenting those different scenarios. So time, cost, and impact around the earthquake damage legacy that we're left with.
So David might be able to answer a little bit further. If I just bring it back to a slightly higher level, the purpose of the infrastructure strategy is essentially to guide you to make some of those investment decisions. So the more detailed decisions, like you're discussing about individual projects or individual pieces of infrastructure, the purpose of the infrastructure is more to make sure that, one, you're considering those factors and to guide you in the decision making rather than actually give you the specific decision. So it's unlikely that you'd be seeing that level of detail reflected in there at this point in time. However, in terms of, as I said, it is a first draft and we are more than happy to go away and work on what else we could incorporate into the document. But if we do think of it as this kind of strategic guiding document, which would then enable you to make some of those decisions, which could be around renewals or it could be around replacements.
So David, have you got anything to add to that?
So
this document won't give you the status update of our programs of work. It will guide you in terms of what sort of things you should be thinking about as you're going through the LTP process. So the answers to your questions will be in other parts of what is presented to you through this process, and some of it may not actually even be there, but this document won't answer that specific question.
And just to add to that, and I think it's a really valid question that you're raising, Yanni, is if you looked at the infrastructure strategy in 2012 or 2013, it wouldn't look like the one we have today because it wouldn't have climate resilience in it. So that time has moved on and factors come in from different angles that we have to consider. And then how does that reflect across all of these? Because if you look at the top one, what do we need to look after would speak to the matters you're talking about. But the decisions we need to make are probably even more complex. And the final thing is our infrastructure strategy as we traditionally built it in Christchurch, and I think most councils, was very much a bottom-up. What do asset managers want? That was all drawn together and that became your infrastructure strategy. That's not a strategy. It needs to be a bottom-up need, and alongside what are the key priorities from a strategic framework perspective and from a long-term plan perspective. And I think this infrastructure strategy is one of the best that we've actually seen.
But I'm kind of wondering, like, how we tell the story. Like, post-earthquake, we decided to defer a whole bunch of renewals because we were going to get brand new infrastructure as part of the repair. Now, that didn't happen for various reasons, but I'm kind of wondering how we tell that sort of bigger strategic infrastructure picture to our community over the position we're in now and what the different choices, strategic directions that we have are, because we've never really closed that loop, right? Like we deferred a whole bunch of stuff. We didn't get what we thought we'd get. Now things are failing that were repaired, and now obviously we've got limited funding and a number of things that we need to consider.
You basically want to tell that story somewhere.
Well, I think in terms of how we make those decisions, like, and you've got things like prioritised funding to renewals and maintenance programs, but like for quite a while we haven't really had a very good or a very detailed asset management update. We used to get room repairs used to come and he used to present very detailed all the assessment we're doing to understand where that sweet point is, which you've got in one of the graphs. But like I have no idea, for example, that we didn't understand what our footpath condition was. I don't know in terms of road renewals. I don't know when we get an understanding of which are the really bad roads in the city and how do we prioritise which ones go first.
So yet you reflect on the asset management work that was done some years ago, yet at that time, at no time did that say actually the footpaths condition survey was done in 2017. That came to light this last year. So I think it's valuable in terms of your description about how we deal with that. And the question Councillor raises is valid, which is in today's world, how do we deal with the historical issues? And at what point do we say we can do this, but we can't do that? And how are we transparent in that? And I think that's something.
And the mayor and the others that were on the, who went and met with Microsoft, they've got really good tools now to understand, to visualize the impact of the different scenarios or choices you've got, digital twins as a city. So we really need to be looking at that, I think, for our infrastructure so people can clearly visualize.
That is a conversation we are having, and we are looking at the digital twin. Yes.
But clearly that will have OPEX implications that will not be insignificant.
Exactly.
So that's just that last bit there. So we need to continue to improve our understanding of our infrastructure. So that's really that key overarching bit here, and that's where we need to look for what opportunities we do have, and that's kind of at that kind of baseline fundamental level, as well as going above and beyond and looking to the future, what do we need to do. So if you have a look in the document as well, there's kind of a short-term, medium-term, long-term approach to things, and that's really addressing here that actually some of these could be expensive, or some of these could be fundamental shifts to the way that we do things, and that's not a 3-year approach, but over the next 30 years we may need to look at fundamentally changing the things we do or the way we do them. So actually that last point really is addressing, or at least acknowledging, that there are things that we maybe could do better, or we could do more efficiently or effectively, and what we need to be doing in this long-term process as we have these discussions is identifying those opportunities, or at least having the discussion about those opportunities so that we can do things better going forward.
And having the data is crucial. I mean, this council, we've had very good data on our horizontal infrastructure compared to other councils around New Zealand, which came to light when we had to hand over our Three Waters information to the Crown, I believe. So, Sarah.
Hello. I'm just wondering about the phrase that we use a lot, the word that we use a lot, which is affordability, and whether we have any sort of definition or conversation around actually not a dollar number, but actually when we're weighing up short-term and long-term, for example, affordability, and whether that's a conversation that is going to be explicit through the LTP process. So not just looking at what's affordable now for residents now in a cost of living crisis, but what residents in 20 years might say about this council and the decisions we made that have impacted affordability in the city in 10, 20 years' time, and how that's being taken into account.
So an intergenerational lens.
But it's like the short and long term affordability.
Absolutely. I think that's a very mature conversation that this council should be having as we go through the joint development, because it will be a combination of different things.
But it's also, it needs to be, it needs to have some backing for it, not just the conversation. So some sort of evidential or information basis for it, so that we can have that conversation with our communities as well.
Intergenerational equity.
So I think that there's probably two elements there. Russell, at the very start of his presentation, actually said, he said affordability it means something different to everyone, and we do need to be cognizant of that as the decision makers. That's really, I guess, your interpretation of it from an affordability lens. However, from the kind of the other lens of being able to provide you with that information, or actually that kind of short-term and long-term pros and cons, so to speak, that's very much something we want to consider, and that's why one of the significant issues is actually we need to ensure that, and that's a very much kind of short-term and long-term thing. Make these short-term decisions now because they have long-term impacts, or we know that we need to start having these conversations now. So we very much hope that actually applying those guiding principles to investment decisions, for example, now unfortunately they didn't all fit on the slide, but that's about that, and that's about making sure that we are considering all of those impacts, not just the next 3 years. In terms of that affordability piece, that's probably a bit more of the financial strategy, as well as up to everyone's individual interpretation. So won't unfortunately have a definition as such.
No, but I think we just need to make sure that we're explicit about having those conversations and the pros and cons for each, and that we explicitly have that conversation when we get to talking to the community about it too.
Yep. Cool.
I think I'd go along with that. What we've got to watch is something might be very affordable, but it's not necessary. We've got to really start looking at what's necessary, and hopefully it is affordable, because all of a sudden we'll have a project that will certainly be affordable, and then we're going, oh, well, this is affordable, we'll do it. But it's not necessary, because we've got to really cut. Like I really love the first one and only LTP I've ever done, where we went round the walls and we were wiping stuff out, and we got down to the 39 million, and I thought, yahoo, we're just forming up here, and then that was the end of it. So we will be doing that again, will we do? Okay, good. Thank you.
One other point that we've got a consideration up there, every capital cost has an impact on operating costs. It has
we
an
call
operating
it whack-a-mole as well, isn't it? Every time you change something, something pops up over there.
Yeah. And I thought the presentation on the on Katie's engagement stuff last week was probably really relevant in that, in terms of actually you've got this finite resource, where would you place it, and actually it's not as easy. So hopefully we'll see some really good feedback coming through that process as well, and we can incorporate that into this document.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Moving on.
Sounds like all roads lead to capital, so in a very timely way.
Only for the start of the conversation, Peter.
We've got Andrew, who you know, who will step you through the first overview of the capital program.
Thanks, Peter. Kia ora, everybody. I just want to start with some opening comments and to reiterate what some of my colleagues have preceded me with. But starting like the last briefing last week, we just talked about a set of principles, and I'll go over them again today. But this briefing, as has been said more than a number of times, and I really just want to reiterate it and stress it, it's a first draft. It's unconstrained. It's pretty raw. It's come off the work that the heads of service have recently done in the activity plans and the asset management plans that they've prepared. So we've taken that in the PMO and taken it for what it is. We haven't manipulated it. We haven't prioritised it. We haven't right-sized it. We haven't refined it. These are all things that are going to occur over the coming months. So we'll be supporting those heads of service in forthcoming briefings over the coming months as you dive deeper into each of those activity areas, and we'll be looking at that categorisation of projects, reflecting some of the strategic priorities that Sarah has just talked about. We'll be taking lenses around sort of climate, around the adaptation, the resilience, the community board perspectives, the Runanga projects, all those sorts of things. So we'll be breaking them down a little bit further, and you'll be delving into the detail a little bit more to ultimately get a prioritisation of projects within each of those activity areas or swim lanes, and ultimately across the PMO, working with the heads of service, will bring all them together with a wider cross prioritisation for the total capital program. So we'll appear again on or about the 6th of September after each of those key activity plans and asset management plans have been presented to you and broken down a bit further and talked about in more detail. And we'll have another round in mid-October to continue to bring that together in this sort of co-development context. So I do have quite a few slides, but I would say don't be overwhelmed by them. It is just a quick high-level presentation of the position as it stands at the first draft. We do use, and you have already seen language in some of the slides that talk about proposed or requested level of capital. But just sort of caution around that. We're not proposing or requesting anything today. It is just a first working draft that is the start of the co-development process. So it's unconstrained and it's raw, and we take on board the comments and particularly in the letter of expectation that we've got to shape it into a deliverable program, and that process is just beginning. Thank you. So these are our principles. We put them up just last week. Affordable, and that reflects the work, the statements that Russell's just made earlier around not only the debt levels but the rates impact as well, and obviously the well talked about deliverability perspective as well. But as the Mayor's just been saying as well, we've got to be productive. We've got to spend money in the right way and do the right things and look for value for money. And importantly, I suppose, underpinning it all, we've got to have a foundation of good project management principles, which is around that predictability of scope, of outcomes, of budget control, and of forecasting, those sorts of things. So they're the principles we carry through in the program. This next one I just want to slip in as a bit of a reminder about Sarah just talked about it as well, the whole of life costs, and every dollar you spend on a renewal comes with a set of operational costs as well. So this just reminds us that there's a sweet spot to be found around when you do a renewal and making sure you can kind of sweat the asset as long as you reasonably can without it failing and causing you a higher sort of repair cost and a loss of service along the way. So it's just getting a balance and a sweet spot of the right level of maintenance, just like you do with your car or painting your house. You do it sufficiently frequent to stop it falling apart, rather than having it sort of crash and burn and up for a big bill down at the mechanic's shop. So this is just a reminder of that principle and getting that balance right. And we do that with the heads of service through their activity management plans, asset management plans. So here it is, the first cut, unconstrained. What this one shows is each of the activity areas, reading on the right-hand side through the groups of activities, from water supply down to corporate capital. And as you look at the lava diagram, it goes from water supply all the way up to corporate capital. So what I've shown here is where the break line is. It's the last 3 years actual figures, and then as we've said through the development of the annual plan 24, we right-sized it. We took a big chunk out of it and pulled it right down in this most recently adopted annual plan, and we saw things getting pushed out into the future, which we said we'd deal with through the LTP. The challenges that lie ahead are evident in this graph here. So yeah, the numbers are high, and we've got work to do through this process to get it back down to something that meets those 4 principles we talked about before. The red line is the it's a nominal. It hasn't shifted from where I think I shifted it to, but it's lined up there at about 440 million, and that's a reflection of the core capital level. Although this is showing all of the capital, including the Te Kaha. So the orange bit on the top includes Te Kaha and performing arts. It's the corporate capital piece. So if you see as that goes on, when those 2 big key projects finish, you get back to a more normalised sort of level of program. Thanks, Ben. So this one just shows that that sort of challenge ahead of us. Again, the actual for the last 3 years on the left, and the future budget. The light blues are that unconstrained view that's coming out of the asset management plans and activity plans as they're presented currently, and the dark blue is the LTP 21 amended by a couple of annual plans that show the 10 years against that. So you can see we've got some issues and some challenges ahead of us to get that right sized. I'll just sort of pause there. Any questions or explanations required on what I've just presented so far?
Yeah, I was just wondering, we've got Aaron online, I'll go to him next. But you were saying in that slide that you want to set the capital program at 100% deliverability.
That's always something we want to do, yeah.
Well,
yeah.
Currently we're achieving 86%, aren't we?
Well, a bit higher than that, but we'll report that for the year-end report, yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, in that order, yeah.
Aaron, then Sarah, you had your hand up, then Mel.
Yeah, my question was in the previous lot, but it was just around with our planning for climate resilient infrastructure. What's the modelling for that, and is climate resilient infrastructure dearer than regular infrastructure? If so, why? Is it not just moving to pump stations to higher ground, so on and so forth? And the timeline for those renewals, is there an equation that says, look, sea level rise will be at that by then, so we can leave these roads and pipes till that point in time, and then they will need changing? Or are we just moving everything to just a future model straight away? What's the plan? How's that formulated?
I think you'll see that as you go through each of the briefings of the individual activity areas. You'll see examples of what that is and what it looks like, and how the activity plans and asset management plans have responded to that. I don't think I can answer it sort of in a one line. Each of the heads of service will have taken a view on that and represent that in their plans as to how they've responded to it.
Right, so it's a wait and see, Aaron. Thank you. Is that it?
Yeah, it would be. Well, with it costing so much, we need to explain. I mean, if it is costing, maybe it's not. It's just a term we use because we're building different tech. We're building for a future, and if it doesn't cost anymore, then, or it does cost more, we still need to explain that to the public. You need to say why you're doing something. You can't just say climate change and then spend their money. You've got to show them why you do it, and then they go, "Oh, brilliant! That's excellent." So we won't be flooding that in 20 years or 50 years. They know why we do something.
Yeah.
No, that's absolutely right, Councillor Kewen, in terms of as we make the continuing future decisions from this year or previous year going forward, more and more, if we are making decisions that are choices that may or may not cost more because of climate resilience, then we will need to be explicit because of that.
Yep.
Yeah, just so it's clearer and they'll understand it.
Yep. Thanks, Sarah. Sarah?
Thank you. Following on from my earlier question to the infrastructure team, one of the four criteria you've got here is affordability, and you have a sort of definition of sorts, which includes a limit of per annum rates increases. And in our earlier workshops on the LTP, we discussed the fact that what we were going to do is work out, before we worked out that number, we were going to work out actually where we need the city to be in 10 years' time and that kind of thing. Work out what that would look like, then see what was deliverable, and then take in the other criteria, because looking at what we need as a city only based on that short-term affordability stuff, we thought wasn't a good way to go. And so I'm interested to see here that one of your four criteria for the current planning is affordability based on a percentage rates increase or a dollar amount that we haven't even discussed yet, and that we know probably isn't good practice if we're looking at what the city needs in the future. So I'm just disappointed to see those words currently being taken into consideration before we've had any of those kind of conversations and against what we earlier discussed.
So we don't know what the potential rates position is going to be, hence why we've put the full spectrum that Russell put up there as full choices. And as we evolve, depending on where council ultimately gets to in terms of its likely choices, will determine what that rate will be. So I think your challenge is fair in terms of that, understanding that that will be about choices council will need to make.
So I think that what we need to do then is, if we're going to use that as one of our principles, we need to add to that definition, to add in the long-term affordability with changes and those kind of things, rather than limit of per annum rates increases.
It'll be short and long-term affordability.
But it's not just short and long-term limit of rates increases.
No.
It's, that kind of thing needs to be in that affordability piece. Because there's also the what if we don't, not just how it might cost more in the build of it, but just if we don't build this piece of infrastructure, it will cost people more, not just the build it, but for other reasons later on.
Thanks, Sarah. Mel?
That was one of the points I was going to make. The other one's about the predictability assumption. How is it possible, especially in things like transport, where we get these, you've got a whole bunch of funding and you need to spend it by next year, and it continually disrupts anything that's predictable. How can we have a contingency of some sort for that? I don't know. Have you thought about it? Because it's going to keep happening, I presume, which is good, because one of our things we want to do is spend government money ahead of our own, which is good.
I mean, to me, that one's about a sort of a continuous improvement path around project management capability, ultimately getting better at scoping things up, project definition, giving more certainty, risk management, and planning and executing well. I think it's a capability building sort of piece for me, is what I mean by that one. So it's a continuous sort of journey of improvement around our capability to give us all certainty about things that we want to do.
Is it also about keeping the manpower as such, so that there's people able to deliver on what we had planned plus extra, which is essentially what's happening?
Yeah, I think so. Yep.
Yeah, so have we got plans for that? Because it basically means having presumably more staff.
Not necessarily. It could be, but it might be about greater efficiency or different procurement practices to group things in different ways, to look at packaging work in a different way. It's not necessarily the increased capital spend doesn't correlate directly to more staff required necessarily. If you do things smarter, and we like I say, we look for efficiency and capability building to do basically do more with less.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily, but it may.
Yeah, it could do.
Okay, thanks. Tyler. And how are we going for time?
We're tight now. We'll have to move at pace, I think.
Okay, moving at pace.
Cool. I've just got sort of one question. That's on that page we were talking about around affordability, the proposed principles. Just tracking back to that productivity line, it says you have to aim to deliver to 100%. But are you expecting on delivering 100%?
I get that asked every time, don't I?
Okay, because I didn't want to deceive the public, because if we did, for example, in some magical world, hit 100%, which is great, I'd be under the illusion that we could have delivered more if we hit 100.
Yes, he can't win.
So if you wish to aim to the moon, you have to aim there to be able to get on the journey. To be fair to this council, when I compare it to many others, actually the delivery of our capital programme has been significantly improved. You know, we've been sat in the 90s.
I think that's great.
And we're in the very high 80s.
Yeah.
If you don't look too far, and I won't name any names, they're sat in the 50s in this period. So that clarity of continuing to stretch is important. We put here aim to deliver, not will deliver, but we want to keep pushing the envelope as hard as we can.
No, it's good to know. It's just for public knowledge.
Yeah, it's a good question.
I mean, that's where you have
really
to
important.
set that your number against that 100%, so you don't come out at 20% or 30. Okay.
As we see the capital program reports this year, because we've struck that new capital budget, it'll be interesting to see how that tracks as well.
That's right.
Yep. Yeah, I agree.
Right,
Thanks,
moving
guys.
along.
Okay, I'll crack on.
At pace.
At pace, yeah. Hopefully the last bunch of slides I'll go through pretty quickly. Look, there's two critical issues you just got to keep in mind, and this one's been done to death, I think, already in the preceding presentations. Te Kaha sits in there, as we know, and does have a big impact on the program as we see it today. It'll be done and dusted in a few years, and it'll be removed. You can see that in the lava diagrams. But we refer to this core capital program concept where we exclude Te Kaha because this one-off big project can skew our stats and performance quite quickly. So that's the first key impact issue, which you're well aware of. The second one is the Affordable Waters Reform Program and set of assumptions around that. So what we've shown here is just the current LTP projection for four waters, because we've got flood protection and coastal works in there as well. And we've put a nominal perforation line in there, effective 1 July 2026, to just remind ourselves that if everything's lifted and shifted as is currently proposed, then that chunk of capital may well end up in somebody else's camp in a few years' time. So that's just something for us to keep in mind. The impact of that could be quite significant on the capital program and obviously elsewhere as well. What I'm going to do in the remaining slides is scoot through each of the major activity areas. So as I said at the beginning, there's a lot of information here. It does look a little bit overwhelming, but don't be overwhelmed. I'll break it down by each activity area, and it just gives you that first glimpse of this unconstrained raw data view of each of the activity areas. And as the heads of service and their teams come back to you over the next 2 months, you'll get into these a lot more, and you'll see what they all mean and how they're being responded to, and how some of them need adjustment and bringing back to meet the 4 principles. So this first one is 3 waters, or 4 as we have it by the activities there. It does make up a large part of our capital program, as you know, and there's a lot of competing priorities in this area. This one's ordered by, in the lava diagram, the activity areas themselves: water supply, wastewater, stormwater drainage, and flood protection. And again, I've got that flag post actuals for the previous 3 years and budget going ahead. So you can see the mountain that is there that's got to be climbed if this unconstrained view were to be met. The little green dotted line that will appear on each of them as well, that shows a nominal increase in the order of 10% per annum of capacity to deliver. So we've sort of said, okay, well, if we did that 440 million, you'll hear about that more at the next F&P, Sam, if we ramped it up 10% every year across each activity areas, that's what it would look like. So it gives you a bit of a measure of where you might go if you could build capacity, uninflated capacity. That's the important bit there. This just flips it the other way by the primary drivers that's been talked about earlier, that Russell included. So it goes through the primary driver categories. Renewal of assets is the big one at the bottom, underpinning a lot of it, and then the infrastructure to support growth is the light blue one, and so on. So here it is presented the other way by the Manhattan bar charts, showing that in the current LTP, as we have now amended by a couple of annual plans, the dark blues on the bottom, the unconstrained views, the light blue. So you can see there's a lot of extra work currently shown there in this first working draft, which will need a bit of work done on it. So that's Three Waters. Each of the next activity areas just go through in pairs of slides, 2 slides for each one. You'll see the lava diagram and then the Manhattan together. So this one's showing transport. Got it ordered by primary drivers in this case. You can see the underlying renewal program, and the bigger golden area, not quite golden, yellow, improved levels of service. A lot of that is, for example, the cycleway program. Again, the deliverability line, a nominal 10% increase per year, gives us a measure of what we might, under that scenario, expect to be able to deliver versus what is in there in the unconstrained view. Do you want me to press them? And that's it again. You can see some light blue tips towering above the dark blues as we've currently got. I like this one because it looks like a shark fin or an America's Cup yacht. It's the waste management program. It's perhaps not as scary as it looks. What it does show is that the light blue up there is the current provisions in our long-term plan for the OPP. And of course, there's a lot of work being done on that, which might change that position, but that's the current provisions in the LTP. And reasonably well matched with what's in the current plan. The differences between the light blue and the dark blue are a lot less pronounced than in the other two we've just looked at, Three Waters and Transport. So this one's sort of looking more aligned with what was already there. Parks, Heritage and Coastal, again showing the sort of nominal delivery line based on past performance. The bottom one, dark blue, renewals is the basic renewal program, and the orange at the top, the new service. I think a lot of that reflects the OARC program. So that's the bit on top there. The green line looks like it's ramping up a lot higher just because of the scale. It's the same sort of slope as the other ones you've seen, or same. It's not the same slope, it's the same rate of increase, but it's got a higher slope because of the scale. All right. So a little bit less pronounced in terms of scale difference, but this one comes back to a little bit like Three Waters and Transport. Some of the light blue tips are above the current provisions, posing some challenges and questions to be asked in the deeper dive of that plan. The community facilities one, this is reasonably well sort of balanced. The bits on top is Matatiki and Performing Arts Precinct, so that's why it sort of suddenly stops in a couple of years. And we've sort of got extra capacity to deliver those one-off type projects. The rest is a bit more kind of core business type stuff, I suppose I'd say. Yeah. And then you can see a better balance because we've actually made provisions for those things already in the current LTP, so it's fairly well balanced between the light blue and the dark blue. Digital is going to require a little bit of discussion, I'm sure. It's got the renewals and the improved level of service shown there at a fairly consistent level, but there'll be more discussion around that from that relevant team. And you can see the differences there as a result of those unconstrained aspirations. So coming back to the overall, you saw this one at the beginning. This one excludes Te Kaha, so you can see the challenge ahead of us, which we talked about a lot during the development of the annual plan. We've got 24 right in order to get through the current year, and we've got some challenges ahead of us. The questions that are in front of us have been put before you in previous slides. You know, how do we right size it? Are we getting value for money? How do we get that balance? And again, how do we get that sort of the categorisation and sort of a balanced program across all strategic priorities? And that's it so the previous one was by each activity area, and this one, sorry, just back. This one's by primary drivers. So you can see the renewals program as a total is a big part of our spend, not unexpectedly perhaps, and the growth line there as well. The last one, in terms of just sort of getting a bit of a perspective, this is a different view. This shows the phase of the project. So down the bottom left, in the dark grey, that's a project that's in the closeout phase. As you go through up into the purple, it's the construction phase, and then beyond that, you're in various phases of design or development or concept, and the light green on the top right of the graph, the bulk of it is concept. So all that stuff in the light green is at a concept phase. So I suppose it gives you perhaps some scope for decision making and choices within that concept phase as we go forward to balance this program and right size it the way we want to achieve it. So all is not lost. There's a lot of optionality presented by that diagram we've got there in terms of the influences that you can make and the decisions that we've got ahead of us with all that stuff in the concept phase. Just speaking earlier to the question that came up around, back to Russell's chart with the pink at the top, that's not significantly defined as one-off projects. I can't remember who asked the question. I think it was Tyrone. A lot of that is program level stuff. So as we get into the activity plans, you'll unpack that a little bit more. But there's no readily sort of available ones that I can pull off the top of my head that says it's this, that, and the other project. It's program level things. So it's kind of the renewals program, the replacement programs. So again, within that, there's quite a lot of choice and optionality. There's very few. I can't think of any particular one-offs that build up that pink stuff that you saw earlier. So that's me. Any questions?
Silas got one, then Yanni.
Sorry, I'm the question guy today. I just noticed a trend in between the years 25 to 28. There's a bit of a hump.
Yep.
And then it continues to go down, and that's in nearly every division outside of digital. Can you talk to me about why most of the program is going to be going up and then coming down?
Because we kept kicking it down the road from the last few annual plans and the aspirations of the prior LTP. And we had COVID and we had lots of challenges.
Does it continue to do that throughout, in your experience with council? Does it continue to do that? Do we continue to kick the can down the road until it becomes something bigger?
Let me answer that.
My experience
any council, any public body, you might see a 10-year budgeting process, but what effectively is, it's a 3-year budgeting process. So yes, you always get a bow wave. Our job is how do we genuinely get that bow wave as small as possible to really show what it is we're going to deliver. What I think is powerful in the fact that we're recording these sessions is this genuinely shows you the challenge about what's the real aspiration to do absolutely everything, which is what our public want, at the same time as how do we actually, are we able to afford it when our public don't want us to spend any more? In fact, they'd like us to spend less.
And deliver.
It. So the challenge for the advantage of recording these sessions is for our public to see the complexity of what we have to deal with and the choices over time you're going to have to make.
Well, it seems pretty clear, doesn't it? Just get a rolling pin and move it across all the years. I mean, why do we keep...
You will find that in time we call that smoothing, but we'll come to that in the financial piece as we go through the next few weeks.
Have you ever used a rolling pin though? Because you do get the pastry bow wave too.
Yeah, well, true.
Got a rolling pin and a whack-a-mole.
I mean, I don't want to give my kids a massive
In
bill.
2021, Peter will tell me if these figures are not correct.
Mm.
In the 2021 LTP, our starting point was something like 1.2 billion.
That's the one.
Per annum, or at least we're at 600 million. So people's understanding of expectations are at least coming down.
Thanks, Sally.
Thanks for clarification, Dawn. Appreciate it.
You're
Thanks.
welcome.
I was just wondering if we've got a strategy for the Commonwealth Games in 2026. And,
Yeah, of course.
Yes. No.
no. Okay. And well, we need a vision. We need a vision for the $6 billion infrastructure spend.
And Tyrone.
But can I just check on a more serious note? What's the assumption for? I'm just looking at the waste management for the wastewater treatment plant repair, renewal, whatever. Like, is that being factored in here, or are we still waiting for the insurance before we know what we're doing?
So appreciating that we're recording these things, Yanni, and you know the sensitivities of the matters. We have some numbers built in. We will need to finalise those numbers as we work through the insurance settlement, and I don't think it's appropriate to say anything else.
Have we got a rough time frame or an expected sort of time frame?
Not going to comment on that in this meeting, Yanni.
Right, Tyrone. Thanks, Yanni.
So the final chart on page 58, if I may.
Which I don't
it's
know
on 58 anyway.
It's 58. Yeah.
So and thanks for your comments on the pink thing. Is the green thing in that chart roughly equivalent to the pink thing in the earlier chart?
No.
No.
Is it not?
No.
Okay.
Pink.
That's cool. The chart on page 37. If we were to carve that up just as the pink thing, how would that split across? Like that would be possible to do, right? We'd know what the pink thing was in terms of those different sections.
You've been to the Barbie movie.
Maybe. Because that's exactly the same chart as the one with the pink thing in it, right? It's exactly the same chart. It's just cut differently.
No, it's not.
No, it's definitely the same chart. Like it's.
No. No, I mean, I think the thing is, with this data, it's large and it's complex, and you can take a number of slices and filters and views of it, and that's what we've done. So this one shows each activity, right?
Yeah.
The other one was a conglomeration of the whole lot, and the pink bit was the whole lot that is unconstrained, shown at the top, over and above what we've already got on the LTP.
But I mean,
I went through each of those by activity to show which ones were over, the difference between the dark blue Manhattan and the light blue Manhattan.
Yep.
So it's that difference. All those bits went into the pink pot at the top.
But that pink bit would theoretically. I know that you can't name specific projects, but it would be divisible in terms of those groups of activities, right?
It drew from some of those activity areas, and remember, some of those were pretty okay. They didn't have much differential between the dark blue and the light blue. Some did, some didn't.
Okay, thank you.
Wear a light green t-shirt next time. Don't get hung up on the pink.
Final question. So the chart on page 40 of Te Kaha, that didn't necessarily tally up with the green bit in the same chart that the pink bit's in.
Let's get into it next week.
It's just that chart indicates most of the spending on Te Kaha will take place in 2024, but this chart indicates that most of the spending in Te Kaha will take place in 2025, and that's quite a significant difference, I think. And I'd just like to you don't need to answer that now.
Yep.
I'd just like to know why those two things don't kind of line up.
That may be the LTP version, but the current annual plan, FY24, will have the Te Kaha spread as it's meant to be.
Okay, so which one's the correct one?
I think it's the other one. I just can't quite confirm if it's this one because I can't read the numbers from here. But I'll come back to you and confirm what the spread is and what's in the 24 plan.
That one adds up to over 700 million. Is that what we're spending on the Te Kaha now?
680 off the top of my head, but
well, that adds up to more than 683.
That'll have potentially the land, contaminated land. Don't think it'll have the streets in it. Yeah.
Right.
I'll
Okay. So it's
clarify
more
it
than
for you.
just the building thing.
Yep,
Okay.
yep.
Okay. Cool. Thank you.
Yes, yeah. So we're at time, aren't we? So
Yep.
we just gonna wrap up.
Wrap up?
Yep.
Okay. As I said, 1st of August we start with libraries and community housing. Following that, strategic policy, planning, city growth. There will be a regular, basically weekly visit to activity plans, but there are blocks. For example, with capital, 6th of September, 18th of October, 8th of November, if you like, mini summits around capital, because you need to see this all in one go sometimes. So there'll be lots of bottom up and then occasionally some big macro chunks as we go through. And look, today was really about framing the problem rather than solving it. So it was a lot, but thank you for your patience.
Oh, that's excellent presentation. Thank you very much.